right, everyone, we'll get started. I'm going to go off of a script because otherwise I can tend to ramble and I want to respect everyone's time. My name is Danielle Whitney. I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. I want to extend on behalf of the Mashpee School Committee a warm welcome to all of you that were able to make it out tonight. We're gathered here to address a critical issue that affects students, families, and communities everywhere. Bullying is a complex problem that requires understanding, empathy, and action. Today, our goal is to create a safe space where we can share experiences, ideas, and strategies to prevent bullying and foster a more inclusive and respectful school environment. I encourage open dialogue, mutual respect, and willingness to listen to one another. Together, we can make a meaningful stride toward making our schools safer and more supportive to every student. Thank you all for being here and for your commitment to this cause. Let's get started. For the next 60 minutes, we're going to have attorney Elysia St. Florian from Murphy, Hess, Toomey, and Lehane. She's going to give a legal presentation. We're just going to hold any questions for attorney St. Florian until the end.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for coming and being here tonight. As Danielle talked about or mentioned, bullying obviously continues to be a big problem in all schools across the Commonwealth. I'm a special education attorney. I represent public school districts across Massachusetts from the Cape all the way to the Berkshires, and I can tell you that regardless of the size of the district, the demographics of the district, whether the districts are rural or urban or suburban, the issue of bullying unfortunately continues to be something that schools and families are grappling with, so it's very timely to have this presentation. Essentially what I will do tonight in the 45 minutes that I'm going to be speaking before I open it up for conversation is really just go through with you what the law says in Massachusetts about bullying so that you can understand what is bullying and what maybe is a violation of the code of conduct but doesn't meet the definition of bullying. So hopefully when you leave this presentation today, you'll have a sense of not only what the definition of bullying is, but also what is the procedures that a school district follows when there is a claim of bullying, what needs to happen, what are the steps, what is the outcome, and also, what are parent rights in all of this, and student rights in all of this, and where is confidentiality and all of those pieces. So without further ado, I will get started. Like I said, I'm going to speak for about 45 minutes and then leave the last 15 minutes for questions, so I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have. Okay, so this is the agenda of what I'm going to go through. We'll start off with the definitions. Okay, so bullying is defined in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 71, Section 37O, and it's also in its implementing regulations, which you can find at 603 CMR 49. Bullying is defined as the repeated, and I underline the word repeated because that really is a key part of the definition, the repeated use by one or more students or by a member of a school staff, including, and I won't read it, but you can see it, really including everybody who could possibly work in a school district, whether it's the superintendent or it's the custodian. It includes everybody. So the repeated use by one or more students or by a member of the school staff of a written, verbal, or electronic expression or a physical act or gesture or any combination of those things that is directed to the victim that causes one or more of these enumerated pieces. Okay, so we're really looking at behavior that has some sort of a pattern, a repeated behaviors targeted at a victim. That's kind of the foundation that we're looking for when we are considering whether acts or behaviors constitute bullying in Massachusetts. So what these written, verbal, electronic expressions or physical gestures have to do is, number one, cause physical or emotional harm to the victim or damage the victim's property. So obviously a physical assault, destruction of somebody's property that happens repeatedly could constitute bullying. The second is behavior that places the victim in reasonable fear of harm or damage to his or her property. So here we are putting the victim in fear. We're not causing a physical assault or physical injury, but we're putting the person in fear. And we use the reasonable person test to make that determination. Would a reasonable person think or have a reason to feel fearful if this message was being sent to them or if these words were being sent to them? Number 3, and this we'll talk about more, is when the behavior creates a hostile environment at school for the victim. And what we're going to see is that generally school districts have jurisdiction to respond to acts of bullying when they happen on school grounds or they happen at school-sponsored events, field trips, sporting events, those kinds of events. But there are circumstances in which a school district can reach and have jurisdiction over incidents of bullying that don't happen at school. If that behavior that happens, let's say, at home, on the internet, on the weekend, creates a hostile environment for the victim at school. And it's not that hard to imagine that kind of a scenario, right, where you've got 2 students, both of whom attend Mashpee High School. One student is sending very derogatory, threatening messages, postings on Instagram, TikTok videos, and so forth. That's going, and distributing them to many other members of the high school community. Obviously, one can see that that could create a hostile environment for that victim when he or she comes to school. So that's how we're able to reach beyond our 4 walls of the school community and extracurricular activities to be able to have consequences for students who bully in this way. The next is when the bullying infringes on the rights of the victim at school. So their ability to safely be at school, to participate in the activities that they normally participate in, to walk freely in the hallways during unstructured times. Students need to be free to be able to do all of those things, to fully participate in their school community. And then finally, whether the behavior materially or substantially disrupts the educational process or orderly operation of the school. So you can imagine a situation where through the use of social media, TikTok, Instagram, things of that nature, many students within a school can very quickly become part of a bullying situation. And that can cause tremendous disruption, not just for the victim, but for the entire school community. So that could also be a circumstance that falls under the definition of bullying. Okay, so these give you some sense of what we're looking for. We're looking for a pattern of behavior that involves either written, electronic, verbal, physical, aggression, threats, harm, those kinds of things that either physically impact the student, put the student in harm, creates an unsafe situation in the school, or materially impacts a student's ability to fully function within their school community. Okay? Oops, did I go the wrong way? Okay. Now, cyberbullying, of course, I touched on that. I mean, much of the bullying that we see these days is done online through social media. So, of course, it's something that we talk about. And what's, I think, important to understand here is that when we're talking about cyberbullying, which can include creating web pages or blogs, we can create fake identities online. People can be very creative, unfortunately, with how they use social media and the internet to perpetuate bullying. Students who are bystanders of bullying, in the sense that they are receiving these messages, can quickly become bullies themselves if they transfer those messages on, forward those messages on to other students, other groups of people. So students have to understand really clearly what their role is. Simply receiving a message may not make you a bully in and of itself, but if you then participate in the process by perpetuating the bullying, then you too could be identified as a bully. Okay. So a perpetrator is the student or a member of the school community, like we talked about, who engages in bullying or retaliation. At the bottom here, you'll see that I talk about retaliation. That means if somebody, let's say a student, is aware that another student is being bullied at school and makes a report to the principal or the assistant principal, for example, or let's say the school is doing a bullying investigation, and as part of that, they need to talk to the witnesses who actually saw or heard some of the bullying happening. Those students cannot then be bullied themselves. If they are, that's considered retaliation, and they will be protected under the anti-bullying statute. So if a student participates in an investigation, or if they come forward with information, they cannot be retaliated against by anybody, by a teacher, by a staff member, by the student who's the perpetrator. If they are retaliated against, the bullying statute will protect them. Let's see, and a hostile environment, we talked about that a little bit, a situation in which the bullying causes the school environment to be permeated with intimidation, ridicule, or insult that is sufficiently severe or pervasive to alter the conditions of the student's education. Now, obviously, you can see in that definition that there's a level of subjectivity, right? It's not completely black and white. So it's going to depend, as I said, what would a reasonable person in that position, how would they respond? How would they feel? That's one indicator. We're also going to consider the student, him or herself. Is the student particularly vulnerable? We're going to talk later about bullying and how it impacts students who have disabilities. And that's one of the factors that IEP teams consider, for example. Is the student likely to either be a victim of bullying or to be a bully him or herself? And if that is the case, then how do we address it through the special education process? Okay, so prohibition against bullying is the second item on the agenda. You know, we have our anti-bullying policy. All school districts, when this law went into effect, which is around 2014, were forced to have and put into place anti-bullying policy. So you have this in your policy. Obviously, the policy is going to indicate that bullying is prohibited. It puts everybody on notice. You cannot bully in this school district. Seems self-explanatory, but often it's just important to make sure we give everybody proper notice. That includes on school grounds, on property immediately adjacent to school grounds, at school-sponsored or school-related activities, functions, or programs, whether those programs occur on ground or off ground. So that would include any kind of extracurricular activities that maybe happen at other school districts, like sporting events, etc. At a bus stop, on a school bus, or other vehicle leased or used by the school. Unfortunately, as someone who deals with these bullying investigations fairly frequently, I noticed that a lot of the bullying, or some of the bullying at least that I see, is relating to behavior that occurs on school buses to and from school, because those are sometimes unmonitored times when students are able to engage in bullying sort of under a little bit of a guise in the sense that they're not in school, but yet obviously we have jurisdiction over what happens on school buses, just as we do with what happens within the school. So again, if there's an allegation that someone is being bullied on a school bus, we're going to investigate that just as we would investigate any other kind of bullying allegation. And again, you know, if the behavior that happens off school grounds creates a hostile environment for the victim, then it's something that the school district is going to have jurisdiction over to at least do an investigation. Okay, you can still hear me, right? Yeah. So, you know, again, I'm going to repeat this maybe more than once, but, you know, we're talking very specifically here about bullying, and I've gone over with you what the definition of bullying is. There's a particular statute in Massachusetts that defines all of this, which is what we're talking about today. But as parents, it's important to understand that even if the behavior in question doesn't constitute the definition of bullying, that doesn't mean that it's not a violation of the code of conduct that the school district would take action over. So just to bear that in mind. This is one particular type of behavior that, as I said at the beginning, involves a pattern of behavior over time targeted at a particular victim. So that's a fairly specific definition. But of course, we know that there are many other kinds of behaviors that violate our code of conduct that may not be bullying because maybe it's not a pattern. However, it's still a violation, and it's still something that a school district would be paying attention to and sort of addressing. Okay. So, you know, the reason why it's important for all kids to understand that they cannot be retaliated against is that when we're doing a bullying investigation, very often we have to speak to other students if you're a school administrator and you're doing this investigation, because perhaps the bullying was actually witnessed, perhaps somebody told someone else about the bullying. If it happened on social media, they may well have participated, seen what the bullying is. So as part of an investigation, school administrators are going to need to talk to all other students involved, not just the victim and the bully. And that's why it's important that students feel comfortable in understanding that they can freely speak and participate, and they too are protected. If they feel like they're retaliated against, they need to tell the administrator, and that will be handled. Okay, so now we're going to get the policies and procedures. So each of our anti-bullying plan has to, of course, include the definitions. It has to include a statement that says that bullying and cyberbullying and retaliation are all prohibited. And very importantly, there has to be a procedure for reporting the bullying. So none of this is worth anything unless students and students especially understand, and staff understand, that there is a way to report if they feel that they've been bullied. So whether there's in every particular school, in every school building, there should be either a person who's designated, whether it's the principal or the assistant principal. There should be a way to anonymously make a report of bullying. Let's say a student is aware that bullying is occurring, maybe not to them, but they want to report it, but they want to remain anonymous. There should be a way for them to do it. Now, of course, in order for us to be able to investigate an allegation of bullying, we need enough information to be able to do an investigation. So we have to know some names, some circumstances. But if the person who is making the allegation wants to remain anonymous, they can certainly do that. And it's really important that all of our students from elementary school through high school know, if I am uncomfortable, if I am afraid that something like bullying is happening, who do I go to? How do I make the report? That's, on the staff and administrators to make sure that that is communicated. And also to parents, especially parents of younger students, if they feel, because they're being told at home that there's a concern, that they know who to go to as well. It's really important that we report these things in as much real time as we possibly can. Too often I find myself in circumstances where people will come and say, often I see this in the context of discipline, right? If a student is being disciplined for something that they did, the student or the family might come forth and say, well, they only did this because they've been suffering from a history of bullying over the last couple of years. But it's the first time that it's ever being brought to the attention of the school staff and administrators. So of course we'll investigate that, but it's a lot harder, as you can imagine, to investigate an allegation of bullying from 2 years ago as it would be to investigate something in real time. So I say this to everybody, parents, students, staff, faculty. If you think something is happening, the closer in time you report it, the easier it will be for the district to do a valid and a thorough investigation. And, the important thing too is, when we think about bullying, the first thing we tend to think about is, okay, how is the student who's the bully going to be punished for this? Is there going to be a suspension? What is that going to look like? I want that student to be out of the school. Obviously, that's one concern. There are many, many laws and regulations around student discipline in Massachusetts, which I'm happy to answer any questions. That would take me a whole other session to go over, but suffice to say that the legislature, when it comes to suspending students, has been really clear with school districts in Massachusetts that we have to try all kinds of restorative measures before we resort to out-of-school suspension. So there are many, many requirements that schools have to try to restore order, to try to impose consequences that do not involve the student being out of school, because the legislature has recognized that it's very important for kids, all kids, to be in school. So that's the laws. Those are the laws that we follow. And along those lines, restoring safety is paramount. Again, we have to restore safety and make sure that all of our students feel comfortable in school. So if someone comes forth and says that they're uncomfortable because something happened, whether they claim it or name it as bullying or not, that's not a magic word, right? I mean, if a student describes something that could be bullying, we're going to take it as a bullying allegation and investigate it that way. We don't have to wait for the word bullying to be said out loud, because not everybody has that language. But the first thing we want to do, even before we start the investigation, is ensure the safety of the students, whoever those students are. If it's the victim, if it's a bystander, whomever it is, we want to make sure while we're doing this process that starting immediately, you feel safe and comfortable, and having those conversations, really. I mean, that's the key thing, is just having those conversations and then figuring out how can we do that. Engaging parents in that process and engaging the students. Obviously it's all sort of related to the age and grade of the student, but, engaging the family and the student in the process of how can we make sure you're safe immediately while we go through this. And of course, strategies in place to prevent retaliation and prevent bullying from happening in the first place. That's always our goal, right? As a school, we can't guarantee that there will be no bullying, zero incidents of bullying at any time. Obviously, nobody can make those guarantees. But what the promise is that we will do our part to make sure that it's a safe environment, and that we will take measures such that if something has happened, that we're going to try to do things so that it doesn't happen again. And there should be a procedure for notifying parents or guardians if there are ever any criminal charges. Unfortunately, in the most serious circumstances of bullying, it's possible that some criminal charges could come as a result of that. So, most districts work closely with their school resource officers. They're the ones, the police, who know what the laws are, the criminal laws are around potential crimes. We hope not to be in that situation very often, but if we need to be, then we consult with our school resource officer just to make sure that we're crossing all our T's and dotting our I's to create as safe of an environment as we possibly can. Professional development is part of the law, so professional staff, even like this evening and at other times, receive this kind of training so that they know, what is the definition, what is the process. If I see something as a staff person or a faculty member, who do I go to make a report? What is the process? How do we investigate this? How do I speak to parents about their concerns? So that kind of training happens all the time so that staff know exactly how to respond to these situations. Okay. And then, of course, a provision to inform parents and guardians about the bullying prevention curriculum. There's also part of the law requires that there is curriculum for all of our students around bullying so that the students themselves receive the education that they need at their grade level, at their age level, to be able to understand not only what is bullying, but the harm that it can cause and what some possible consequences of bullying might be. Okay. All of these bullying policies and plans have to be developed in consultation with teachers, administrators, local law enforcement, parents, and students. So all constituency groups were part of the development of our anti-bullying plan and any revisions that happen over time. And of course, there has to be notice. There has to be an opportunity to give the public the time to comment on these policies and procedures, much like lots of policies and procedures that school districts have. And they have to be updated every 2 years. So every 2 years, your plan has to be updated, and then there would be all of these opportunities to receive feedback from constituency groups. The idea being that we, learn over time where things are working, where things need some help, and we make adjustments as we go along. Okay. Every year, parents have to be provided with written notice of the bullying plan. And then also every year, the school district has to report to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, that's DESE for short. And that report has to include the number of reported allegations of bullying or retaliation in that year, the number and nature of substantiated incidents of bullying or retaliation, the number of students disciplined for engaging in bullying or retaliation, and any other information required by the department. So school districts, of course, are accountable to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and need to keep this data to be able to give it to the department so the department can gauge how each school district is doing relative to the issue of bullying. We also need to conduct anonymous surveys at least once every 4 years with our constituency groups to gather, again, information around, how are things going? How could things be done better? What is your feedback? PRS, which is the Program Resolution Systems, it's a section of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They review complaints that are filed usually on behalf of students relative to all sorts of complaints that there may be against the school district. So PRS has the authority to investigate the alleged incidents of bullying and notify the victim about PRS's authority. Now, PRS, just like any overseeing agency, tend not to second guess what a school district decides in terms of whether something is or is not bullying. Because they understand that they weren't the ones dealing with it. They weren't the ones doing the investigation. They don't know the students. They don't know the circumstances. So unless there was something really, really mishandled or a conclusion that truly doesn't make sense, none of these agencies are going to second guess what a school district has done. What they pay attention to is that we followed the correct policy and procedures. Procedures are very, very important to agencies like the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, any of those kinds of bodies. So as long as the school district follows the policies and procedures, then generally speaking, they are going to use because as we said, there's subjective elements to this definition of bullying. It's all going to be very relatable to the circumstances in a particular situation. No two bullying investigations are ever going to be the same. No two outcomes are ever going to be the same. There are nuances, right? In every fact pattern, there's something different. And so we have to put our trust in our administrators and our faculty who are doing these investigations, that they're going to put forth their best effort and come up with an appropriate conclusion based on the definition. But if there's a concern that the process hasn't been followed, then that's a situation where PRS would potentially get involved, if that makes sense. Okay, so now the sort of the meat of it, which is the investigation process. Okay, so here we have, so let's assume that staff has become aware that a student is reporting that she, I'm just going to use she, could be he obviously, that she has been bullied or retaliated against, but I'm just going to use that she has been bullied. So that has become known. Now, depending on, this could have happened in a variety of ways. There could have been an anonymous report, maybe the parent reported it, maybe the student reported it. But there's a report of, let's call it cyberbullying, of a middle school student. So what happens next? We know that we need to do an investigation. So there should be someone within the school who's sort of designated as the person who conducts these investigations. So however the information is gathered, it should go to the person that's in charge of doing this investigation. That person then is immediately going to speak to the student who's alleging the bullying, notify the parents that their child has made an allegation of bullying, probably speak to the alleged perpetrator, if we know who that perpetrator is, speak to any witnesses that might have either received the bullying, know about the bullying, any contact whatsoever, any images of the bullying, if it was done on the internet, if we have screenshots, videos, Snapchats, Instagram postings, whatever it may be, notes, it could be anything. That's what the investigation is going to do. We're going to gather all of that information. And then once we have all of that information and we feel like we've spoken to everybody, we've seen all the evidence that could potentially exist around this incident, that person is going to write up a report. That report is going to list everything that the person did. It should include things such as, I spoke to student A for 15 minutes. It's very helpful to give the date and the time that the conversation took place. That gives a sense of how long the conversation took. And then ultimately, once all of that is chronicled, and again, not with the names of the students, it's going to have, student A is the victim, student B is the alleged perpetrator. We've got bystander, C, D, and E. That's how it's going to look. We're not going to put the names of the students in this report. The reason we're not going to is because that report then becomes part of the student record, and it would be, and it is to be given to both the parent of the victim and the parent of the perpetrator. However, and we know that in these circumstances, the victim and the perpetrator know who the other one is, and the parents will likely know who the other one is. But as a school district, we've got very strict student record regulations that we have to abide by. So we can't tell other parents, for example, what the consequences. Let's say we decide, this report is going to, as I said, list everything that we did, and then you're going to look at the definition like we looked at the very beginning, and we're going to say, do these facts meet that definition? Is there a repeated pattern? Was the victim put in reasonable fear of harm? Was there harm? Was there destruction of property? Was a hostile environment created in the school community? If the answer to those questions, or some of those questions, is yes, then the conclusion is going to be that this constitutes bullying. If the answer to the question is no, then the answer is it's not bullying. That doesn't mean that the consequences are necessarily going to be different for the alleged perpetrator. The consequences could be exactly the same. But if you're the parent of the victim, we can't tell you what those consequences are, and that can be so frustrating, especially if you are really worried about your child and her safety. You are going to be really, really upset to think that student, that student who's now been classified as an actual bully in this circumstance is still in school, for example? How is it possible that that student has not been kicked out of Mashpee High School for the rest of his life? That doesn't make any sense. How is that possible? Well, there are lots and lots of rules around how we can discipline kids, as I hinted at the beginning. It's a whole other presentation, but I'm happy to answer your questions. But suffice to say that the status of a student can impact that. For example, if a student is identified as a student with a disability, we cannot suspend those students from school for more than 10 days unless we do a manifestation determination meeting and decide that the behavior in question is not a manifestation of the disability. It's complicated. If we decide as a team that the behavior in question is due to the student's disability because they have an autism and emotional disability and they don't have the ability to control their actions, or maybe they're highly impulsive and have executive functioning disabilities that make it impossible for them to regulate themselves when they get provoked, the team might say, you know what, they did this, but it's related to their disability. In other words, but for their disability, they would not have done this. If that's the case, we can't suspend them more than 10 days, because if we did, that would be discrimination based on disability. So these are the kinds of nuances that we deal with every single day, and if you're not intimately involved with these laws and regulations, as a parent, you may have no way of knowing that. And so what you see is a situation where your child has been bullied and the perpetrator is not getting the level of consequence that you would expect. Also, what can happen sometimes is that you as a parent might compare your situation to a situation that happened earlier in the year, or a situation that happened last year, and you saw that that student was suspended for half a year, and now your child is being bullied, and the bully in your case is coming back to school after 10 days, and how is that possible? It's the exact same circumstance. How can that possibly be? Well, again, the status of the student in question might impact that. Maybe there's more to the other story that you have no idea about. Maybe there have been many other offenses with that other student, whereas in your case, the bully, this was their first time offense. Well, that's going to probably factor into it as well. I tell school districts all the time, we've got to, if we're going to suspend students, we have to dole out discipline in a very egalitarian way. In other words, students should be, of course, treated equally for what they have done and what the consequences are going to be. That doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same, because I just want you to know that there are nuances. Every case is different, the facts are different, and so those are all of the factors that come into play. Making sure that all students are treated equally does not necessarily mean that every discipline is going to be exactly the same in every circumstance. Okay. It's important to note, too, that any student who makes any false accusations of bullying or retaliation can also be subject to disciplinary action. I mean, this is a serious subject, and it's a serious statute, and if kids come forth and knowingly make false allegations that someone is being bullied that causes the school to undertake all of these steps that we're talking about only to find out that they made it up, that's going to be a serious problem, and that student is going to be subject to discipline, and they need to, schools need to put students on notice of that. And again, I can't emphasize it enough that it's very critical to create interim safety measures for students and create plans after investigation. So I talked about doing, having a conversation with families at the beginning around making sure that they feel safe as we are doing all of these steps. But even afterwards, we need to check in with students to make sure that, are you still feeling comfortable? Have we done what you need? Is there more that needs to be done? And it doesn't have to depend on whether we conclude that it's bullying or not bullying. A student can feel highly uncomfortable by the actions of another student, even if we don't end up saying that it's bullying. We as a school district still have a responsibility to make sure that that student feels safe. So it's not all hinging on whether or not it's not all hinging on the outcome of this bullying investigation, I guess is what I want to say. Sometimes I find that people can get really caught up on whether the school decided that something is or is not bullying, and I feel like we lose the forest for the trees a little bit, because I feel like what's really important is that we have restored safety and that the kids are comfortable and that everyone can continue coming to school to the greatest extent possible. Okay, so when we investigate, obviously document. I think I've been saying this. I have seen a lot of situations where, let's say it's the assistant principal who's in charge of doing these investigations. She will do everything that she's supposed to do. She will have talked to the students, she'll talk to the witnesses, talk to the perpetrator and the victim, all of that. But Then when I ask her, well, where's your report? She didn't write it down. There's no report. And so then when the parent wants a report, there is no report. Well, that's not okay. There has to be a report. We have to document our efforts. It's good for everybody. It's important for the teacher or the administrator that's doing the work to document that, and parents have a right to see that report. So documentation is absolutely critical. Schools should have a system to record even informal monitoring, for example, a Google document among grades or team of teachers regarding a victim's affect that day, or noted interactions with suspected perpetrators. So just a way to kind of continue to monitor what's going on once something like this has been reported to us. And preserve all emails or text communications. You know, I'm constantly telling staff when I go to these trainings, you know, be really careful around emails. Let's try to limit emails. I always say this myself too, like, don't use emails for substantive communications, because that can all become part of the student record, and email is not really the right way or the right place or modality to have substantive conversations about students. We're all busy, and sometimes you can't possibly have phone conversations with everybody about every single thing comes up. We all need to utilize email, but in a bullying investigation especially, make sure that we are using those, keeping those if we have them, etc. Oftentimes schools will have a bullying form to use. This helps the administrators who are doing the investigation make sure that they're checking all of the boxes. It's not required, but it's a handy thing to have, a format, so that all of the investigations look similar to one another. Document the notice to parents. Make sure that we're following up with parents. We've talked to them at the beginning of the process, we're going to check in with them in the middle of the process, and then we're going to talk to them at the end of the process when we provide them the report. Make sure that there's that follow-through. That's really important for maintaining a level of trust between the school and the parents, that we're having that communication back and forth during these times that can be really sensitive and scary for people. Also be aware that if any kind of bullying that's being alleged involves a student who's in a protected class, so a minority student, a student with a disability, a gender identity issue, something along those lines, schools have to recognize that that could also be a civil rights violation. So we may need to investigate that not only under our state anti-bullying statute like we're talking about tonight, we might have to launch a bigger civil rights investigation, like for example, Title IX. Let's say the bullying has a sexual undertone to it, involves sexual harassment. That's not unusual for us to see something like that. Well, now we're doing a bullying investigation, but we're also doing a full Title IX investigation. And Title IX has a very different process. I mean, not very different, but it has a different process. We're still investigating and documenting and doing all the key pieces, but there are some differences. And it's really important for schools to recognize that there should be a light bulb that goes off. Oh, wait a minute. We're talking about a student in a protected class. Is there a civil rights violation here in addition to our state law that we're following through, and make sure that we cover that as well. Okay. So again, communicating with parents is really critical throughout this process. Notifying the parents and the perpetrator of the outcome, like I talked about. Parents and students should never feel that the school is being unresponsive. We want to keep parents of both the victim and the accused bully informed of the investigation, even if it is fruitless, even if we end up finding this is not bullying, this didn't even happen, whatever the case may be, we want to keep everybody apprised of what's happening. Parents of the perpetrator have a right to know the outcome of the investigation and the district's response. This notice must comply with student record confidentiality requirements. Same with the parents of the victim. They should also be notified of the determination of whether this is bullying and action taken to prevent further acts of bullying or retaliation. So in other words, what are we going to do to keep the student safe now that we've decided that your child was bullied? What are the next steps? How are we going to make sure that we do our best that this doesn't happen again? But we also have to comply with student record confidentiality requirements. So as I said before, you may want to know, well, what kind of suspension did the perpetrator get? Now that you've decided this is bullying, you must be able to tell us how long this student is being suspended for, or why he hasn't been suspended, or what's happening next. And unfortunately, we cannot share that information. And just think, if the tables were turned, you probably would be happy to know that we wouldn't share that information about your child either. The Massachusetts Student Record Regulation is extremely strict around confidentiality of student records. It's just anyone who works in this field, it's a mantra. We know that we cannot share this information with anybody unless it is with consent of the parent or legal guardian. Unless the student is 18, or unless one of a very narrow set of circumstances applies, usually having to do with a health or safety emergency. But we really, under almost zero circumstances, can we tell parents anything about another student's personal confidential record. Okay, sorry, it says Hudson. I meant to fix that. The district, it should say the district's policies indicate the range of disciplinary action that can be taken against the perpetrator for bullying or retaliation, provided, however, that the disciplinary action shall balance the need for accountability with the need to teach appropriate behavior. So as you may or may not know that in Massachusetts, there are 3 statutes that deal with student discipline: 37H, H1/2, and H3/4. Those are the 3 buckets. It's a whole separate presentation, but the only way that a student can be suspended is if one of those statutes are invoked. And as I also mentioned, for the lesser offenses, the legislature requires us to think and to document all kinds of alternative methods that we have utilized before we resort to an out-of-school suspension. The same laws that apply to any violation of code of conduct or anything else apply to bullying. There's not a different law on how to discipline students who have been accused or found let's say, guilty of bullying. We follow the same 3 statutes that we do in this circumstance as we do in any other circumstance. We've got 3 statutes that allow us to suspend kids. That's it. It has to fall into one category. It's very prescribed for us as to how we do that. God, I keep pushing the wrong one. Okay. So steps to protect the victim and prevent reoccurrence. What types of support services are available to the student, to the bully, to the victim, to the witness, and any bystanders? Things like counseling supports. Is that something that the child needs? Now not getting too deep in the realm of special ed, but there's a concept called child find in special education, which basically says, we as a school district have a responsibility to identify kids who may have disabilities. Is this bully's behaviors, does it show us that maybe there's a disability? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. But we might think, do we need to seek consent to do a special education evaluation? Certainly not in every case, but it could come up. So it's just something to be thinking about. What are our procedures for restoring a sense of safety? If this is a big cyberbullying situation where everyone in the school is aware of what happened, it's become a really big deal. Maybe the whole community knows about what happened. These things can blow up, unfortunately, quicker than we would like sometimes. So how are we coming together as a community and trying to move forward, trying to work together to resolve things so that we can all, again, be in school safely, comfortably? That's always the goal. Do we need to protect the bully from retaliation? Sometimes the bully, him or herself, may need some sort of protection and some kind of care or counsel. So that's also something that we're responsible for. Do they need a referral to other kinds of, agencies in the community? Does the family need support? All of those things. We're really looking at the holistic picture, with the goal being that, this was a very unfortunate event, and we're trying to make sure we do what we can do so that it doesn't reoccur. If an incident involves students from more than one school, the school district, first informed, consistent with state or federal law, must notify the appropriate administrator of the other school. So let's say you have another school district visiting you for a sporting event, and it becomes clear that there's a bullying event that happens on the sidelines of whatever basketball game or volleyball game, whatever's happening. And it involves one of the other students from another school district, not our school district. Our we would have an obligation to notify an administrator at that other school district that their student engaged in this behavior so that they then can do an investigation. If an incident involves a student older than 21 who is no longer enrolled, then we don't have any jurisdiction over that. We only have jurisdiction over students that are enrolled with us. So if it's something that we think could be a crime, that's something that we would notify our local law enforcement about. Yeah, and these are the circumstances when we would call our school resource officer, when we think the bullying actually may constitute a crime. And now it's really kind of beyond our purview as a school district, and we need to let the police do their part and make their own determinations. We are not obviously a law enforcement agency. That is not our role. We don't want that role. We're going to leave that up to others. Okay, liability. So sometimes, this is more for staff than anything else, but, it's important that I remind all staff and administrators that because of the Massachusetts Tort Claims Act, people don't have to be concerned really about their own liability in these circumstances. As long as they're acting within the course of their employment and they're not engaging in gross negligence, they cannot be held liable. So that's important for administrators and school personnel to realize so that they can freely do their role without being afraid that they're going to be subject to civil lawsuits and things of that nature. And here's just a case involving the Lynn Public Schools back from 2018, which basically stood for what I said. The students' parents had argued that the school district was negligent because staff had been informed about the bullying on multiple occasions but did nothing to stop it, eventually resulting in their son's injuries. And they also claimed that the school district had failed to implement its own anti-bullying policies. And even with all of that, the court dismissed the lawsuit against the Lynn Public Schools and its employees because of the Mass Tort Claims Act. They did not find any they didn't find any gross negligence on anyone from the school, and even though this bullying happened in school, the court found that they were not liable for it. And then the last category, which is close to my heart because I do special education, is protecting vulnerable students. So as I hinted at before, certain students are more vulnerable to either being the target of bullying or to be the bully. And that's why, so for example, for kids on the autism spectrum who are on IEPs, receive special education services, we are required in every IEP team meeting to ask the question of whether or not that student is vulnerable to either being a bully or to being bullied. And if the answer to that question is yes, then we have to put services in the IEP to support that student, counseling services, social skills, those kinds of things. Also, we generally ask that question at all IEP meetings for all students. It's not required as it is for kids on the autism spectrum, but we generally ask that question. And it's important because, kind of as I was saying before about the manifestation determination, we can't discipline or punish kids for behaviors that they engage in because of their disabilities. But on the flip side, it's important that we support those kids to try to prevent them from engaging in those behaviors in the first place. So we have a responsibility to give them the services and supports to try to prevent these kinds of things from happening. So yeah, that's really in terms of vulnerable students. And again, going back to the privacy piece, we can't tell you if the student that bullied your child is a student with disabilities. That would be a huge violation. But that's going to impact what the consequences of the student are. So just to kind of keep that in the back of your head, if you ever face a circumstance where you get frustrated with your school administrators, just know that there's a lot behind that. It's not that people don't want to tell you things, it's that they truly cannot. Okay, let me just see here. Okay, so I covered the first 2 points. The last point is a team should consider whether the bullying is denying a student a FAPE. FAPE stands for Free and Appropriate Public Education. So all students who are classified or who are eligible to receive special ed through an IEP are entitled to a free and appropriate public education. So if a child is being bullied who's on an IEP, the team has to come together and say, hey, is their entitlement to FAPE being impacted by this? Are they refusing to come to school because they're being bullied? If they're refusing to come to school because they're being bullied, they're being denied a free and appropriate public education, right? Because they're missing school. So how do we address that through the IEP team process? And here I just have a couple of cases. Let me just check and see how we're doing for, oh, no, we're not doing well for time. Let me pause for 1 second and see if people have questions. Yes? Yeah, so mental health is, an emotional disability is one of the categories that potentially makes a student eligible for special education services. You know, the question about special ed eligibility has to do, does the student have a disability, which in the case of mental health, it could fall under an emotional disability, that impacts the student's ability to access the general education curriculum. Some students have mental health diagnoses and are functioning perfectly well. Other students, less well. So the question is, do they need specialized instruction or related services in order to access the curriculum? So that's what an IEP team decides when they're doing an initial special education eligibility meeting.
When we're doing investigations, there's studies that show that kids of color get punished more, than other kids. So when we're doing investigations, teams or schools, the biases that can occur when doing those things, how is that addressed?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. You know, I think that is something that has to be addressed through training, honestly, making sure that people are aware of these inherent biases that you're talking of and being cognizant of it. You know, I suggested before that it's really important when we're disciplining students that we're equitable and that we're making sure that there's no class of students that are being disciplined in a way that's different from any of the other students. So that's, you know, we have to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that we are being equitable in our processes. And I think one way to do that is through training and recognition of what biases may exist. And also following processes so that we're implementing the same process with every student in every situation.
So when we're doing the plans that occur every 2 years, it's supposed to be evaluated and written, and then there's supposed to be community members that
Yep.
on those things.
Yeah. I don't have the answer to that question, but that's certainly a valid question, and I think that the questions that you're raising and the concerns that you're raising is certainly something that could be part of those conversations. You know, I think that's a very timely thing to be talking about, and something that we all should and need to be paying attention to. Oh, Hope has a, yep.
Superintendent, the last time we put our bullying policy was December of '22, and so it's up for review by the policy subcommittee of the school committee this fall, and it'll go on. And the public input is done through the school committee process, through public comment. There's a first and a second reading, and those agendas are posted publicly. So that is typically how the letter of the law piece is covered, but certainly anyone who has input on any of the policies, but particularly you're talking about the bullying one, is welcome to reach out to Interim Superintendent Thompson, any member of the school committee, they're not all here, but many of them are, or to me or any member of the school staff. Hopefully that helps. No, it's 2. It's every 2 years.
Yeah, every 2 years, yeah. So I don't want to go over my time because I know you have a really interesting and exciting panel coming up. I see just one last question. Why don't I take that? And then, yeah. The word repeated? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really, again, unfortunately, depends a little bit on the circumstance. You're looking for a pattern. So you're looking to see if the victim is being bullied or something is happening to the victim more than once. It's over a pattern of time. So the more serious the event, the less frequency it needs to be. So let's say you have 2 really serious events, then that could be enough to constitute bullying. 2 huge social media blasts. On the other hand, it's, a death by 1,000 cuts. Little pokes, little things over time, just constant. The subject of the pattern is really the impact on the victim. How often is that victim being impacted by the bullying? That's what we're looking at. Oh, you can't hear the question? Okay, we're talking about the word, the question is repeated. When we look at the definition of bullying and we're looking at repeated pattern, how do we know, what are we looking for when we say repeated pattern? And so what I was saying, I think you heard my response to that. And then the next question was, well, what if you have one bully that's bullying a lot of different people, but he's hitting each person just one time? That may not constitute bullying because each victim is only being targeted one time, but he's engaging in a pattern of behavior, so we need to consider how we're going to manage that student. It may not be bullying for each of those victims, but he's engaging in a pattern of violation of code of conduct, so that's going to still be addressed. Yeah.
Can I make one more point? Oh, wow. Okay, so we're kind of focusing on bullying and how things are repeated. If we have inappropriate behavior, we deal with inappropriate behavior. So there's a fixation on the bullying law, and that's one aspect, but if a child is not behaving or is being mean and unkind, it doesn't mean it's not going to be dealt with if it doesn't meet the definition of bullying. And I think people need to understand that, okay? We're not being tolerant of unkind behavior. It just might not meet the level that it's bullying, but it doesn't mean it's not addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope I conveyed that. I really have been meaning to convey that the significance of whether it is or isn't bullying is really not the end of all of it. It's not that significant.
So I have a question. I'll come back to you so everyone can hear you. Who had the hand raised first? Okay.
So I have a student here in the Mashpee school. There was incidences 2 times where she had been bullied, and so what I'm hearing is if my child can take the bullying better than your child can, then that determines how the bully is going to be addressed or dealt with.
I don't think I conveyed that. That was not my intention to convey that. I think I said, it's everything is case by case, and everything is going to be investigated. So we're looking at a reasonable person standard. How would a reasonable person react to whatever the bullying is or whatever the conduct is, but also taking into impact, how does it actually impact that particular student?
Okay, well, we're talking about young children, in my case in particular, so some children can actually handle it, I guess, in a better way internally, and then we have children that are actually committing suicides now because of this, because they're supposed to be able to handle it, and if they're not feeling supported by their school districts and the team. So I have a real concern about that.
Yeah, no, obviously, I understand, of course, that you would have a concern about that, and I think I would just encourage you to speak to your team, your teachers, your administrators about those concerns. I mean, I think everybody is always wanting to reach resolution between, and have an environment where the school and the parents and everybody is working collaboratively for the best interest of the child.
Do we have anyone on the panel here that wants to answer the last question as far as like maybe resources or how the school handles both the aggressor side and the victim side? Okay.
Yeah, so I guess, if you have a concern, that concern should be brought to the building administration. If there is a child who is having a hard time, they should talk to a trusted adult in the building. That could be their teacher, that could be a counselor, that could be the assistant principal, but those, if there is a concern, then please bring it forward. And if, we very well might handle, if from what we're hearing, you very well might get the bullying report form to fill out, and we will investigate it and deal with it.
So I have never received a bullying report form to fill out.
They are available on the webpage, am I correct on that? And if you call the school and ask for a bullying report, that we will send it home, or we will give it to your child, or you can stop by and get it.
How am I supposed to know before coming to this meeting tonight that there's an actual report as a parent that I'm supposed to fill out, other than just coming to the school administration, respectfully? How would I know that there is an actual report for me to fill out? This is the first I'm learning of that.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah.
Couple things. First thing is you don't have to fill out the form in order for a bullying investigation to begin. I think Alizia mentioned that earlier. So if you just called the school and expressed your concern and used the word bullying, we're going to start an investigation. I'm not, because that's not my role, but the school-based folks are. The second thing is in the student handbook, and I'm a parent in town too, so I have a 10th grader, and I've been reading the Power School re-registration every year since he was 3. You do check off that you've read the handbook with your child. The bullying forms and all of that is in there. Again, I say I'm a parent of a 10th grader because I will admit I don't always necessarily click on all the clicks, but they're there as well. They're on our website. But the bigger thing that I want you to walk away is all you have to do is pick up the phone or send an email to anyone. I don't know what school you're in. I don't know you. And that will trigger a bullying investigation if you are concerned that your child is the victim of a bully situation. Does that help?
That does. Now I know where it's to be found. I do want to say that, did I hear that if I did go to the school, which I'd have, am I supposed to get a copy of that report?
If a bullying investigation was done?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, you would get notice. You don't
I
necessarily.
never received one.
Okay.
So, all right, I know you guys have another panel to get to, so I don't want to overstep my time.
No.
Yeah. All right, so should I wrap it up, conclude? Yes.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for your time. I know it's, coming out after hours. I really appreciate it. I hope that I provided some insight and some answers, and I just, again, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We're now just going to kind of open it up to the question and answer discussion portion of our program tonight. What I'm going to do is anyone that has a question for any of our members here on our panel, we have a variety of different people here, principals, assistant principals, district leaders, special ed department, and school committee members. So if anyone has an additional question, if you do want to just raise your hand, I can come over to you and, hold on, it's up here first.
I am speaking as a parent. I am not speaking as a school committee member. And I hear you because I have a son who has been bullied in the school system for 3 years. And if you ask my son, do you think you're okay? He's going to say, yeah, I am. He is not going to say, well, I can't play football at recess because I was told that he is playing, the person that's been picking on me gets to play football and it's my turn to play soccer. He is never going to say, this bothers me. He is going to go about his business and he is just going to suck it up because that's who he is. But unfortunately, we do have a lot of kids that aren't going to speak up and commit suicide. There's a lot of kids in this state, in this country, that have been bullied and have not come out on the other side. So as administrators of our school, to make our kids feel safe, you have to show them that they can confide in you and that they can trust in you. Again, some kids are always gonna say, I'm fine. It doesn't bother me. But then you're gonna get the ones, unfortunately, that hurt themselves. So we have to be mindful of who we're speaking to. boys versus girls, which is a sad situation because unfortunately in society, boys are gonna say, I'm fine, where girls may say, I'm not. So just be mindful of that stuff and document it. Last year was the first year that paperwork was documented that my child got bullied. And he's been at it for 3 years. When I got the report, the administrators that are responsible for filling out that paperwork and doing that documentation failed. So it did not come back as bullying because there was not repeated instances where it was documented. So just be mindful of what you're doing in the jobs that you have because our children's future is at stake.
So I have 3 questions. Is that okay? Any objections? Okay.
Sure.
So number 1 is what programs, what restorative justice programs or behavior intervention programs do we have in place for our high-risk bullies and our high-risk victims? Like, do we have any programs? Because I know suspension was brought up a lot, and I think as a parent, we don't understand what consequences are available to the students that they may be participating in, and what type of programs that we have to kind of rehabilitate.
Okay, who wants to start?
All my stuff. Hi, I'm the new principal at Mashpee Middle High School.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, I mean, at the high school level, I know that we have a lot of things going on in terms of supports, which I was really excited about coming in new. I actually made a list today because there are so many that I, was surprised to learn about some of them when I first started. So we actually have an MMHS peer leadership program, which is really great because it's student-led, which I think is really important. It comes from the voice of the students. That is overseen by members of our school counseling office, and they work with students and train students to deliver lessons. So students go into wellness classes and deliver lessons. This year, we really want to enhance that. We just had a meeting about it last week to try to build on that. So right now, it's starting with our grade 7 students are going to be receiving these peer-led lessons. But we'd like to I would love to see it be pushed out a little bit more and have repeated lessons that happen, and it's not just a 7th grade thing. We also have classroom behavioral standards lessons. So school counselors actually from the school counseling department, which would be guidance counselors and also school adjustment counselors, they push into classes and deliver a few lessons throughout the school year based around like various things, mental health, bullying, things like that. The wellness curriculum throughout the district, I would say, the wellness curriculum in every year actually has bullying. It's part of Massachusetts curriculum standards. And I know that our wellness department, our teachers meet collaboratively, they plan lessons together, so students in their wellness classes are receiving them. We also have some unique things here at the middle high school. We have the Teen Task Force. That's in collaboration with the Children's Cove, and that is also peer-led. It's actually an after-school program that students sign up for, and it's peer-led. The Children's Cove comes in, works with our students along with our school counseling staff, and it helps and then those students will push into classes again and work with younger students to build self-advocacy skills, so when to speak up and when is it appropriate to speak up, who should you speak to, who are your trusted adults in the building, and so it's peers helping peers to identify those trusted adults. We also have the Hope Squad, which empowers students to connect with peers, again, through trusted adults. The Hope Squad is centered in suicide prevention, but as we all know, suicide prevention, you know, that bullying plays and harassment and all of those things play a part that lead to that. So it's all part of the conversation in terms of the Hope Squad. Then we also have the Active Minds program, again, student-led. Hold on, my pen's getting in the way. It's a student-led school-based group that empowers youth to be more supportive of mental health awareness and each other. The Teen Task Active Minds, it's another outside agency that Julia Carpenter, one of our school counselors, works with to implement the Active Minds program. So, and then our administrators are, I mean, I'm extensively trained in restorative practices through Suffolk, and I know that Mr. Markarian just went to restorative practices training today, which we're really excited about, and yesterday, and I missed him a lot in the building. And Ms. Melby was trained last year. The restorative practices training is actually coming into our district in October for our half-day PD. So I know that, and this is just a little bit, because then we have clubs, like we have the GSA Club, the Gay Straight Alliance Club, you know, and all of those clubs are supports for students of maybe particular populations of students who might feel like they're more likely to be targeted. You know, so, and I'm not sure, I can't speak to what's happened in the past, but I know what I see in my vision for the future, and it's for all of our students to be supportive of each other, and when they see an act, that they can either help that child get what they need, lead them to an adult. Like, I want kids stepping in as well, kind of just saying, hey, you know, going to Mr. Markarian, coming to Miss Brady, you know, going to the kid who's doing it and saying, you need to stop. You know, that's the environment that I'd like to see happen here at the middle high school. But I mean, the supports are there. I think it's how we're using them.
I think those are amazing, and it's obviously setting a culture of being an upstander. But I wonder if we have a program that is for someone who's had multiple instances, and this is like a focused, I wouldn't say like a detention program, but a program focused on helping deal with whatever is causing the student to struggle and show us in this way. And this sounds more like this is kind of embedded in a culture that we're building, which is beautiful, and we need that, but I do wonder if they're two separate things. The peer leadership program is amazing. We need it before grade 7.
Yeah.
Most kids are getting their phones by grade 6. They need to be prepared by the time they get their phones. So I think that if we could push that out, that'd be great. I have just 2 more questions, and I'll be really quick. So, oh yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, sorry.
First, I'm going to leave the restorative practices and curriculum pieces to you guys. I'm Christine Brown, the Interim Director of Special Education. So I just want to talk from a perspective in terms of direct interventions that are available to all students, but then specifically to students who have been identified with disabilities in that area. We have school counselors at every building. We're actually very fortunate to have a really robust school counseling program in our district. The Casey Coombs School has 2 school counselors. Quashnet School has 3. Middle school, high school has 2 adjustment and 2 school, guidance counselors. So we have a lot of resources available for students, whether or not they are identified with a disability. So those are in place for sure. They can provide short-term counseling, and then also a big part of what they do is provide referrals to outside agencies. We have Gosnold, who partners with our schools to provide counseling, more intensive counseling to students within the school district as well during the school day, and then have tons of resources that we can provide for parents and families to access outside of school as well.
You can have this, because I know you. This is 4 pages of everything we do. You can keep this one. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm not going to expand too much more. I mean, Bonnie touched on so much of it. What I will say is, like, so in Quashnet this year, we made a few drastic changes, and I want to say that we've been working on that. Mr. Carroll and I and Hope, and even going back with Patty before what occurred in the spring at the high school. But I'll just mention two big changes we made at Quashnet this year. First, we have a brand new class that all 5th and 6th graders are participating in. That's the reason we went to the 6-day special. It's a big undertaking to change your whole schedule. But the idea is that they are taking a digital literacy and computer science class to work on digital literacy and how you use technology and what's appropriate on phones. We are building that to now a 2-year course that we implemented this year. There are standards from the state, and one of the major units is cyberbullying. But also, it's starting with how to write a professional email. So it's working on digital communication. So we've implemented that class. All the 5th and 6th graders this year are taking year 1 because it's our first year. Next year, the current 5th graders will implement year 2, and then that'll be a 2-year class going forward. The second thing we made a big staffing change this year is we've had 3 adjustment counselors, and we moved one of our adjustment counseling positions to being a school social worker. That's a really key difference to understand. So one of the things that our social worker does is she is available from 11 to 1. 11 to 1 is a really, really essential part of the day at Quashnet because all the lunches and recesses occur during that time. When I got to Quashnet, what I experienced was our 3 adjustment counselors were really tied up in lunch bunches, and lunch bunches are incredibly important. That is a big, a major time where we use components to meet IEP minutes to make sure we have social emotional growth. However, what we were lacking and what we have now with the social worker is the ability to intervene in situations that occur in the moment, at recess, at lunch. So our social worker's main component, and she is based in the office right next to Mr. Carroll, because she will handle anything that comes down to being social emotional. So not everything has to move up to the discipline level right away. Because what was occurring is Mr. Carroll or I were trying to intervene, and maybe it wasn't even at the level of discipline, like you're referring to. Maybe it was something, kids are feeling unsafe. I had a 3rd grader come to me in the cafeteria the first day, I'm feeling unsafe, I'm in a new place. Right? We had a person available during lunch, a trained social worker, to meet with that child. So I could go on and on about all the programs we do, but we made 2 major changes this year that we have been working on since last January. I think it was in January when Hope and I sat down and started really peeling back the layers of digital literacy and getting our librarian, who is also a digital computer science teacher, and I have walked into that class this grade, and they are doing the emails, and it is really cool. And I have talk about anonymous reporting. Kids can email me. They can email Mr. Carroll, and now we are training them how to do that if they need to report something bullying. So I'll just mention those 2 things. I think they're awesome additions to our school this year.
Does Lori just talk about the lapse and reason for not emailing and the confidentiality that occurs?
Yes.
Marie, it's like we're working in tandem today. I mean, one of the things I wanted to mention that is district-wide, maybe not so much at the KC Coombs, although it's available, but I don't think they would take us up on it, is we have a monitoring program for our technology called Securely. And Securely not only looks in at what kids and staff are doing, I get all the Securely alerts. Sometimes during the wellness class when they're studying mental health, I get a lot of Securelys because somebody's looking up depression. So we get those alerts. They go to the counselors and the administrators and me and our director of instructional technology. Someone handles whatever securely comes in, day or night. It goes to my, I get a phone call in the middle of the night if it's something really severe. So, and we know since we implemented this is probably 6 years now because it used to be a different program, but the same concept. We have saved 3 lives since then. We know that. And that is because of this program. So you don't even have to clap, but I am too, because yes, it's literally the reason that, I will advocate for the financial support for that program for the rest of my life if I can. The other part of it that I love, there's actually a ton of other parts, but the other part I wanted to mention is an anonymous tip line. So on every child's Chromebook, and every child in this district has a Chromebook, actually grade K up, pre-K has iPads, on the Mashpee central drop-down on the bookmarks, and we teach them how to do this. There is an anonymous tip line, and kids can click on that link on their Chromebook. Actually, I think it's on their homepage, but it's also on the bookmarks, and our director of instructional technology, Susie Brooks, teaches kids how to do this. They can report anonymously using that link, anything they want, and it goes to the administrators who can then investigate it. So that wasn't mentioned, and I think it's a really important piece that maybe we have tried. I mean, there's a lot of communication that goes out to families. There's a lot of nights like these where we try to provide information, but it doesn't always get where it needs to go. So I'm hoping you'll be our sort of prophets of this and share it with the masses that these things do exist and we want people to use them. So I'll stop there. They have been taught. I am not going to tell you that the kids all know it because I have 3, and I can tell you that that's probably, no, but they have been taught not only in the digital literacy and wellness class, and computer science class at WashNet, which, by the way, there's also a wellness class in grades 3 and 4 that is new this year, where we're doing a lot of the social emotional instruction as well, all the way up. Do they remember it? I don't know, but we do reiterate it, and you as parents can also reiterate it, okay?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Hope kind of covered, but I just want to hit on your question to clarify, just to clarify what I was saying in comparison to what the attorney said. So I'm just saying a lot, I'll just put it in simple 5th grade terms. I would have said something, but I don't want to be a snitch. Right? So the sake of the emails, the kid can reach out and say, hey, Mr. Switzer, I observed this in the cafeteria. Or, hey, Mr. Carroll, I observed this in the cafeteria. We're not going to then have the robust email conversation. That's when we pick up the phone and call the parent and say, hey, your child reported this. But that gives a child an outlet. Also, we have 3rd and 4th graders who are willing to run up to us right in front of the other kid and tell us, but different kids are different. So that's just an avenue that we provide so a kid doesn't have to worry about retaliation. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think, separately, we're not going to then have an exchange with that student where say, thanks for letting us know. We chat with the student. But it's just another avenue they can report anonymously.
Great. Any other parents have any questions?
We're going to go to Coombs.
We're gonna go to Coombs
yes.
next.
Hi, everybody. Oh, this one's louder. So just to clarify, we actually do get the securely notices at Coombs as well, and it really surprised me. I didn't expect that from our pre-K to 2 students, but we do get those, Mr. Prana and I, and we do respond to those, and it is really, really helpful, and it is something. I go back to a Christmas morning when I had an alert at Quashnet, and 9 o'clock calling the parents, and it's just such a tool that's so valuable to help support our students. At Coombs, it's really teaching them every bit of socialization. It really is. Our kids come, and some, they're learning how to be students. They're learning how to interact with one another. It's a lot about modeling at the Coombs School. It's a lot about positive reinforcements. Last year, we started working with the May Institute and instituting a very structured and systemized PBIS system, which is a positive behavior intervention system. And one of the aspects of that is we enter a lot of data in every incident that goes on, whether it's a minor incident or a major. And what that allows us to do is during the school day, we see when there is a bump in activity and inappropriate behaviors, so to speak. And like Mr. Switzer was saying, that 11 to 1 is really a popular time. It also tells us a location in the school where most incidences are occurring. Interesting, the bathroom is busy, and even in a pre-K to 2 building, they are learning that yes, you have to stay in a stall. Those things are reinforced all the time. But working with the May Institute and PBIS, it helps us develop those lessons that are so critical for those early learners and for the youngest Falcons. So we can try to prevent the behavior before it comes. It's really important. We also were designated with the No Place for Hate last year. We're really trying to build the language and give kids the tools, because if they're able to say what they feel and they can communicate that to us, then we can intervene very quickly. And it's really about that instant recognition that something is not right. It doesn't mean, like we were talking about, things are always bullying, but if it's not appropriate, it's not appropriate, and it needs to stop, it needs to be addressed. We need to mark the moment, which is part of what we've all learn from Khalees Warnham's work here in the district. We mark the moment, and then we help build the appropriate responses with students. So it's busy at Coombs, but I think it's about that socialization piece. So.
Great. Do we have any other questions?
No. Okay.
I'm wondering if you're seeing an uptick in bullying based on our current climate. You know,
Start again, because they won't be able to hear you.
I'm wondering if you're seeing an uptick in bullying. I know the school year just started, but we're in a real contentious moment in our society. A lot of bullying, a lot of cyberbullying among adults from the highest levels of our society. We're seeing bullying, name-calling, victimizing of certain classes, races, and I'm wondering if you're seeing that trickle down into the school system and how you are handling it.
Can anyone answer that? Yet? Yeah, I don't, you're right, it is early.
So no one came to school singing, eat the cat, or
No.
eat the dog? Not one kid out of the...
So I'm coming from another district, and a very large urban district, and I am very pleased with how little I see in terms of kids treating each other poorly and saying those inappropriate things. Like, especially, I agree with you, because, in my last district, when we would hear things like that on TV, the next week it was like nightmare. It was like, here we go, now we're gonna have to deal with this, and we have not here at this school, haven't heard one thing like that. And to me, it's actually surprising, but very pleasantly surprising.
And that's not to say it won't.
Yeah.
Or that it's not behind, maybe kids are saying things.
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm not going to say it never happens. I will say, like, if you're referring to the current, what's about to happen, like, politically, and seeing all that stuff on the news, we don't see a lot of that trickling at Quashnet, at least. I will say, and I can't say names, like, we did have an investigation last year that was a positive bullying finding due to a kid repeatedly using the N-word directed at another student. So, like, we see that. So it's not that it never happens, and I'm going to be candid with you. But like Bonnie, I also come from a district, not urban, but down Cape, where it was really heavy discipline. I did a lot of bullying investigation, knives, fights. I went to court a lot. That is not what I see overall in Mashpee. I think we're very fortunate with the community we have. That's not to say it never happens. I just gave you an example of something that was really unfortunate, and we did deal with that last year. But for the most part, I'm not seeing like these like political trends coming off the news and kids coming in and saying that stuff. In fact, we had a situation today of a parent who was talking about a word that wasn't derogatory when they were younger, but was saying, you can't say that now, you can't say that now. And so there is learning and growth that is happening, not just with our students, with our parents too, and I think that's pretty cool to see. Lowest consequence is pretty much a parent phone call, maybe a student conference with a student, but anything from there all the way to external suspension, we log as a log entry in Power School, and we have all that data. And so this summer, Mr. Carroll goes through that data, he brings things to me, and we identify issues, and we identify things that are on target. So I'll just share two things with you that one is to show you something that was on target and something that is not, to be fully transparent, that not everything's perfect. We did identify that referrals coming from staff members when in regards to race is equivalent to our student body. So the same percentage of students that we have that identify as black, we are getting that same percentage of referrals over the course of the students. That was like the good piece. We're okay, we're in line, that's good reporting. We have an imbalance of boys being reported a lot more than girls. So that's how we measure it. So Mr. Carroll and I are looking at the different demographics. We bring that up with the staff. We talk about that in staff meetings. What are we adapting? Why is that happening? We have those conversations. And then we peel back into the individual students. So we look at, for example, let's say we have a student who didn't bully someone, but had an incident where they pushed someone on the playground. It was a one-time incident. We do a restorative practice. They serve up lunch detention. There's always a consequence to attached to restorative practice, and I think that's a misconception we need to debunk a little bit, is that like when we do restorative practice, there is still a consequence. You might miss lunch, or maybe you miss recess, but you're then sitting with the social worker, sitting with the assistant principal, and doing some kind of restorative piece. And then we look, so we go back to the first incident, we do this in the summer, and then we look and we say, okay, I'll just use my own name. Elijah got in trouble on, because we have all this data, because we keep it, October 12th. He pushed Brian on the playground. And then we go back. Okay, on January 5th, he pushed another student. Why did that occur? And we peel back and go back. But nothing else happened. So we had one more incident. So we look at the individual kids and if it occurred again. That's how we measure it. I, again, want to reiterate, I could not do this alone. This takes a team, and I am fortunate to have Mr. Carroll, who is really good with the data. He peels it back, we discuss it, we bring it up with the staff, and then we try to fix the things that we're off on and recognize the things that we're on. So I hope that answers your question.
I was going to go with the district quick, and then I promise you're next.
All I was going to say is, because I like Mr. Carroll so much, this year we found a program called Open Architects that will do a lot of that work for him, that now Excel and his eyes have been doing. So we have a platform we've been using for a few years called Open Architects that has had our MCAS data and our Access data, which is our data for multilingual learners, that aggregates and disaggregates all of the data for us so we can look into subgroups and figure out trends. Our buildings are going to talk about, they look weekly as their pulse meetings at data around student behavior and student social emotional wellness. But Open Architects, what I think is amazing about it now, all of our discipline data is in there, all of our log entries, all of our star reading, it's speaking now to all of our DESA, which is our social emotional universal screener that we do 3 times a year. Our DESA data is going into Open Architects, and then with just a drop down, we can, disaggregate by whatever group we want to. The other thing I'll say just from the district before I give it to Mr. P is the school committee has asked that we have a more systematic way that we present data to the school committee, which is to the public. And so we have a calendar set up for this year where, we always talk about AP testing, we always talk about MCAS, but we've assigned particular data points to a school committee meeting, to the monthly meeting, not every month, but every other, that will also align with the student presentations that happen during that meeting. So you'll hear the quantitative and a little bit of qualitative information, maybe from me or the principals or teachers, and then you'll see student outcomes related to that when the students give their presentation. So I got to give a shout out to Ms. Lewis, because that was her sort of request that began this conversation, and I'm really excited to see how it goes this year. And now, Mr. Prana, it's you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Prana. I'm the assistant principal at the Tennessee Coombs School. Talking about the data and seeing how things are improving. So just like what Mrs. O'Brien was talking about, we collect a lot of information and we're able to target specific areas of the building. Then our school counselors and our BCBA are able to take that data and then they develop specific lessons to target literally every single classroom about how to behave in the bathroom, appropriate behaviors based on our Falcon 5, which is part of our PBIS program that Mrs. O'Brien was alluding to earlier as well. Those things, and then we bring that data to our staff through staff meetings and we show them this is what we're targeting this month. We're doing hallway behaviors, and then after we see that, we're able to collect the data, and we see the trend go down that hallways are actually a little bit quieter. No one's running anymore. And you can actually feel it and see it in the building. One of the things that we really worked on last year that we brought into this year is the voice check, and recognizing that it was so loud in the cafeteria and other parts of the building. Now everybody uses that common language so that kids aren't confused about when you're being asked to give a quiet coyote. They all understand and they all know. And going back to that also gives them voice and also appreciation of being able to understand the things that they want to do. Going back to the part about giving kids the voice, is that part of the program too, is that when kids are getting in trouble, and what Mrs. O'Brien was alluding to, is that we're teaching skills. I do conflict resolutions with children on a daily basis because kids are making mistakes and then we're here to help them. We're the helpers. They see us as helpers, they want to be around us because we're helpers, and they're going to report, just like Elijah was talking about, every single thing that goes wrong. But we also have to train them as well to use their voice to maybe, how am I going to deal with this myself? But if things feel unsafe, or I feel a little, if I feel nervous, then I can go to a safe, trusted, loving adult. And that's myself, Mrs. O'Brien, and every single teacher that they see, and every single adult. Sometimes it's all of them, yes. One of the big things too that we really utilize at KCCS is whenever I start or do a bullying investigation, I'm thinking just like what the attorney was talking about, the situation was happening. 9 times out of 10 when I'm working with the kids are usually really good friends. Something has happened, and I always ask the student that is being perpetrated against or they feel like they've been wronged if they want to talk to the other student. If they say no, then they absolutely do not talk to that other student, and I will take care of it for them. They usually say they want to talk to that other student. During that process, I sit with them and the other student. I make sure that they know that we can stop this at any time, and we invite the other student in, and we talk about it. That gives the kid voice, so in the future, if something happens, they have a basis or a cognitive ability to figure something out to say, to solve their problem, but they always know that if they feel unsafe, if they need help, they can come to myself, Mrs. O'Brien. We have 2 fabulous school counselors, a full-time BCBA, and a school psychologist on staff to support students. And periodically throughout the entire school year, school counselors, our BCBA, are going into classrooms and teaching specific lessons about social-emotional learning and things to do based on our Falcon 5 and our PBIS program, which is the core of our entire foundation.
Yeah, so if I can just wrap up a little bit, and not that this is the end-all and be-all, but if you go to the DESE website and you look at the behavior pieces, Mashpee is really, really low, okay?
Not everybody knows there's a.
Yeah, so you can go to the DESE website and go to the district profiles, and you can see, obviously not for last year, I don't think it's up there for last year yet, I don't think it comes out till November, but the last 5-6 years are up there, consistently low. And part of that is the investment that this community has put into the counseling, the BCBAs, and that sort of thing, the mental health pieces, and you just heard how your administrators are constantly measuring and taking the pulse of their population and adjusting their program to address things and teach the children what good behavior is. So there's a lot of support here for that social, emotional, mental health piece, and it definitely is showing it in your discipline data. So you had another question.
Awesome. And I have a kindergartner who has told me that Mr. Prino will protect her if anyone's mean. So you're doing a great job. My last question, it goes back to the incident that we had last spring. We had a trial by fire on our social media by the adults. And that's where a big concern for me comes in, is I wonder what role the school plays, if any, in creating like streams and communication within the community so it doesn't get so out of control as it did. Because it makes sense that people are worried and they're concerned, and they go to social media to be heard, right? They feel like they're not being heard, they don't have an outlet. So like, how can we as a school district and a community change that moving forward? Or impact it, maybe not change it, but impact it.
I don't have the answer. I'm just going to start there. But I live in Mashpee. I already said that. So I know there is a Mashpee page. It's not something I go to, and I absolutely will say for the rest of my career, I will never, ever govern by social media. It's inappropriate, it's not okay, and it's disgusting what our kids see adults doing on those pages. That being said, that's my I should have taken this part off, and that's like me, the person saying it. In the town I worked in before, and all of the communities that you've worked in, and you've worked in, and you've worked in, who else? You, we've all worked other places. There is the West Bridgewater Hub, there's the Sandwich Scoop, everyone has one, right? So Victoria, right? I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Your question is great, and I'm excited if any of them have answers. I would be surprised. But it's not what the school can do, it's what we can do as a community, because what happened on the social media was really not the school. It was us as adults acting horribly. We were not acting in a way that was appropriate, functional, useful, and we wonder why we see behaviors like this from kids. So I'm going to throw it back at this, group of many in the hopes that it will get out there to say, we have a job to do. We are responsible to make the community that we want. It is on us to do that. So I told you I wouldn't have an answer, but I definitely have an opinion. So.
So I just, and again, I do not spend time on those pages because it's very upsetting. But we have to ask ourselves 3 questions. Is it truthful? Is it kind? And does it make the situation better? And unfortunately, there are places, social media being one of them, where people are not following those three rules. So here we are, we're meeting and we're talking about kids and their behavior, okay? And again, kids model what they see and hear, okay? I was not here for that unfortunate situation. My understanding is that it was already dealt with by the school before it became a social media piece and the video and all the other stuff happened, okay? So there was a piece out there that the schools weren't, it was already adjudicated, if you will. There were consequences given to the people involved, the people bystanding, the people videoing, all of that sort of thing. Obviously, I'm not going to get into anything more than that, but it was dealt with before, the social media craze. So I think it's important that, again, is it truthful? Is it kind? And does it help the situation? If it's not one of those 3 things, we really shouldn't be talking about it, because it is literally the rumor mill gone haywire. And unfortunately, it's not just this, this situation, it's really an epidemic. Sure.
Sorry. One thing I do want to add, though, you should not give me a microphone, is I'm not standing up here saying that the school had no responsibility in any of this. One of the things that we discovered, or that really came, it's sort of like the pandemic highlighted things that were already problems. I feel like that incident highlighted things that were already problems. And one of the things was our communication strategy from the district perspective. And I think that the interim superintendent has done a great job in coming in and talking to people and really realizing that we needed to have a clearer, more sort of systematic communication strategy. And he's already started to put things in place. We've got a new platform. Certainly the administrators are doing a phenomenal job with that. But I don't want to stand here, and I got on my soapbox a little bit, and I'm not going to get off it, but I won't say that the school had no part. The school for sure could have done a better job communicating to families. I'm not going to say we should have sent home a notice that day, because because there's so many context pieces that wouldn't have been appropriate, but I do want to take ownership of, and what we've done is tried to learn from that, and Kathy has her hand up, so I'm going to get this to her next, is take ownership of our part, and everyone needs to look at their side of the street, in my opinion. And Kathy, I'm coming. You want me to run? I'll run.
My child didn't move for me.
Here you go.
Hi all, Kathy Lewis, Vice Chair of the School Committee. I just want to kind of tack on something to what Dr. Hanscom just said. And social media can be great, social media can really not be great, and I think we saw that in the spring. But what we also heard tonight from Ms. Florian was that there are statutes in place, there's certain things that can and cannot be shared. So, while it looked like there was this silent wall of nothing from the district, which I think that was what, as a school committee member, as a parent, as someone who really does care about the children in this community, it was really hard to watch what happened. And I think, Dr. Hanscom hit the nail on the head. It's, we've got to watch what we're doing, and even Dr. Thompson said too, we're seeing what's mirrored, or we're watching it on social media in the schools, if it's mirrored at home, or however you worded it, much more eloquently, I'm sorry. But basically we've got to keep in mind that there are all these other pieces. So, sometimes silence can be deafening, but also sometimes silence means things are being worked on. And I guess we need to keep that in mind too as we go through these incidents. You know, as long as something's been reported, if you have a question about it, call and talk. Every one of those people, they're busy, yes, but they will get back to you. And if they don't, then let the school committee know and we'll follow up. But they're responsive people and they are definitely here for our children. But I think sometimes, you know, we lose sight of that when we see everyone on social media going, yeah, what's going on? And I know Victoria and Marie, you guys tried to like hone it in, but sometimes you're not gonna see school committee members necessarily weighing in because there's so many pieces, there's things happening that we can't necessarily talk about, and I know that might sound like a cop-out answer, but just, we heard tonight some of those statutes, we heard tonight some of the legalities of the conversations around these incidents. So, you know, when you're on social media and you see that, just keep that in the back of your mind that there's only so much that can be said until a resolution happens or until an investigation is completed. We don't want to speak without all of the facts, I guess, is really the bottom line too. So, thank you.
And I'll piggyback off of Kathy because of the same thing. I mean, people came at us at our school committee meeting after this incident happened, and then you sit there and you wonder, just be kind. There was no need for half of the stuff that was said. Again, there are legal things that we cannot release. These are children. These are not 18-year-old, 21-year-old, 30-year-old people. These are children. And children make mistakes. I'm an adult. I make mistakes. Us as a community have to be able to share with these kids the right things to do. When you see stuff like that on social media and your kids are asking you questions or their friends are asking you questions, you say that to them, hey, this is not the way that it's supposed to be. You know, you get more with kindness than you do with anything else. And if you have the same people over and over again saying the same negative things, reach those people, you know? I made it very well clear. I wasn't very happy with the situation either. But there's a right way of handling things and there's a wrong way of handling things. And social media, I'm sorry, is the wrong way to handle things.
Hi, Brian Whedon. I'm the secretary for the school committee. I just want to remind everyone that majority of our administration here, while they might be new to the district, they're not new in their roles and being leaders and providing the professionalism that you all provide. But I do want us to be mindful of that they're still trying to get situated, you know, so we need to support them. I think that we have a great administration here, but the whole reason why the school committee wanted to put this on was to gather input and to make sure that we're getting this information and we're sharing it with the community. Both Kelly Robson and I serve on the subcommittee for the policy subcommittee. We have engaged Eve Mahan, who is the chair of the Youth Student Advisory. So we're trying to engage our students, we're trying to engage the public. This has been a rolling item on our agendas for school committees since the incident has happened. We're constantly reviewing the plan, and we want you all to be part of this process. So I just wanted to remind us, and I think that Principal Brady said it best, that you know you can't really go back to speak about what happened before their time, but now they're here, and I think that they need the support from the community. You know, our assistant superintendent's been here since August. I mean, everybody up there is pretty new except for our veterans, Hope and Mary Kate. So.
August of 2017.
The interim super.
He needs interim.
The interim, the new guy. So, no, but I just wanted to bring it back to why the school committee wanted to do this, and regardless of the outcome, this is still successful because now we know that you all have the information that you need to help, and at the end of the day, they work for you and your families, but we do too. Whether you voted for us or not, you're still our constituents. You're more than welcome to reach out to the interim superintendent or any of us as school committee members, and we will do our best to make sure that they go through the appropriate people and channels to hear your concerns. So I just wanted to remind us of that and thank everyone for all their work.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, you know, if you see something or hear something, please call the building level. Let us know. Those are the people closest, the best people to give you the first answer. And no one is being tolerant of inappropriate behavior. We are going to work to teach the children how to behave and how to go about it better the next time. So I don't know if there's any more
Does
questions.
anyone else have any closing remarks from the panel or any last remarks? Okay. This is the last one.
Just real quick, but you know, we look around and the chairs are empty, right? So it's almost like preaching to the choir. Every time I come to one of these trainings, and I respect all of you and thank you for your hard work, just to make sure you're very clear of that. My son started in like 3rd grade, and I don't think I could have picked a better school district for Chase. But the chairs are empty, right? So when I go home and I go on social media and post my picture of the empty chairs and tell them about the climate in America and how it trickles down and how we need to be here and how when we had incident, there was a big outcry and response, but then where are you? When we're giving you all the information, telling you the wonderful things that are happening in the school system, it's your community. And we were on the national news, at least the state news, right? Maybe nationally. I mean, it was, some of that bickering on social media was totally coming from out of district. We should be proud of our community. We should be proud enough to show up, to say, there was a problem, I know you're working on it, I want to hear and I want to be a part of it. So when I think about what I want to write about and talk about, because I do blog and I do use social media in a very, what I think, responsible and powerful way, my concern is the bullies will say, you know, come after me. But I'm beyond that, because you have to have a boldness too. If you know you're doing the right thing, those 3 things you say, if you're saying it with kindness and you, okay. So I just wanted to comment on that the chairs are empty. So how do we take it from an email at home with a flyer that nobody reads, because I didn't read it. Marie called me and said, are you going to the bullying thing? And my answer right away is, of course, you invite me anywhere, I'm coming, right? So, yeah, so how do we get it out of the email and get it into the psyche of the parents that you want to show up, just like you do for a football game? Or do we have to bring it to the football game? Do we have to make, why are you laughing at me? Do we have to make it the halftime of the football game, just to 10 minutes of the bullying platform or whatever we have to say? We have to bring the message to the people if the people aren't going to come for the message.
Thank you.
Well, the one thing you could encourage them to do is to, I'm going to put a plug in for Mashpee TV, because we did have it recorded so that people can watch it in the comfort of their home for the next 2 weeks or so. But at least they'll be able to see the conversation, see the presentation, and the question and answer pieces as well, and the schools talking about the programs and the things that we are doing. So thank you.
Great.
And by the way, it was on the big old sign on 151.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't just a flyer that said home improvement.
Yeah.
It was that big old
Right.
bright sign that looks at you.
Right. So yeah, Wednesdays, what's up Wednesdays? There is a post going out on School Status Connect every Wednesday that has all the flyers for the entire district. So you only have to look for it on Wednesdays. So you'll find everything that's going on in the schools, one-stop shop. So there you go.
Great.
All right.
As we come to a close of this powerful discussion on anti-bullying in schools, the Mashpee School Committee would like to thank everyone for your insights, stories, and contributions. Tonight's conversations highlighted the importance of addressing bullying with empathy, accountability, and proactive solutions. We've shared ideas that can inspire change and support students in creating a safer, more inclusive school environment, but our work doesn't end here. What we take away from this forum needs to be implemented in our schools, communities, and everyday actions. Let's continue to stand up for respect, kindness, and the well-being of every student. Together we can make a lasting impact, and again, thank you all for your participation and commitment.
I'd also like to say one more thank you to Danielle Whitney from the DA's office for coming and helping facilitate this for us. Thank you, Danielle. Have a good night, everybody.